All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm Busche, managing partner of Nomadic Venture Partners. We're an early stage venture capital firm focused on decarbonizing mining, manufacturing, heavy transportation sector. Today's session will be on sales within the mining sector. So we've got a couple of experts, including founders who have developed interesting solutions for the mining sector who will share their experience. So let's start off with introductions. Tim, would you like to kick it off?
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I should say. This is Tim. I'm also one of the co-founders here at Nomadic Venture Partners. I have a mining engineering background. I worked as a mining engineer at a large open pit gold mining operation, then switched my career into mining finance, where I helped finance large mining projects. And then after doing that for a number of years, I switched my career into actually starting my own venture capital fund with my longtime friend here, Busche, and then that's Nomadic Venture Partners. And I also have a entrepreneur background. When I was in college, I started a trucking company, heavy duty 18-wheeler on the road trucking company, and that's also why we're focused on the heavy transportation here. So that's a little bit about myself.
All right, we'll hand it off to Will next.
Hi, I'm Will Hunt. I'm a senior consulting engineer with Orica. Previously, I have a mining engineering background. I worked for Newmont a long time ago. Prior to that, I had a site work infrastructure construction company I started. And after I worked with Newmont, I went to work for a startup in Australia. Stayed with them through a major acquisition and private equity investment. Started my own business. And had an exit a few years ago in a sale to Orica. And since then, I've worked with Orica to help manage the OrePro team, one of the technologies that I helped to invent and innovate in other marketplaces.
All right, Fred, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Fred Busche. I am the regional customer success lead for mine planning for the USA and Canada at Maptek, and been working at Maptek for the last 10 years. I've worked doing training, implementation, consulting. I've worked a bit on the product side, and I find myself now on the customer success side, primarily focused on software adoption for our customers. And previous to that, I am a mining engineer as well by education, and worked both on site and in the consulting business. So,
all right, wonderful. Ravi?
Yeah, thank you, Busche. Hi, everyone. My name is Ravi Sahu. I'm the founder and CEO of Strayos. My background is in enterprise software. Before starting Strayos, I worked for about 12 years building enterprise data applications, remote sensing data, machine data, and the network sensor data. Transition into mining industry. I'm a computer science engineer, so unlike everybody is mining expert here. But I transitioned into mining about 6 years ago, learned a lot about the industry, and launched a platform, Strayos, where we provide an AI solutions, for the mine to mill value chain.
Wonderful. And full disclosure, Strayos is actually our newest investment in the mining sector, so we're super excited to have him within our portfolio. All right, Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Busche. So we wanted to actually organize this webinar because, as many of you know, right, we are focused on investing in pre-seed and seed stage companies, and oftentimes what we encounter with is founders are really excited about some kind of a technology that they have developed, but really struggling to get going in terms of getting traction, right? Getting that first customer, and if they have a handful of customers, they're sort of plateauing in terms of getting additional customers or growing, and they often express these frustrations with us and have asked for experiences or share some of the case studies that we have seen over the years. And I thought, what better way to do that, right? Than actually than having to speak about it, from our perspective, but then actually invite people who have worked in this space, have started their own companies in the mining industry, and have grown very successfully over the last 4 or 5 years through the mining cycles, and then in Will's case here, I was able to actually sell his company to Orica, which is a multinational explosives and blasting service provider. So that's why we wanted to put this together. Hopefully, you guys will enjoy the webinar. We're going to go through a variety of topics, but if there's anything that you want to touch on, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section, and then we'll address them at the end. But I want to kick this off today with just a high-level overview of what it is, how different it is, I guess, right? To develop a software, an enterprise software, and then service that are provided as a service to mining companies, than anything else. And I think many people are familiar with SaaS models, but often they struggle with the uniqueness in the mining industry. And maybe I'll just ask this first question to Will. From your experience, can you point out some of the differences? Maybe you've had some expectations, coming out of some of the companies you've worked for. I know you've worked for BMT, which provided hardware as a service, right? To then actually going into enterprise SaaS. What are some of the challenges and differences you've encountered?
Well, SaaS is remarkably easier to scale. I'll say that. Anything that requires hardware in the mining industry is really challenging. I mean, think about the logistics of, say, mounting something on a shovel, which I'm sure Fred has plenty of experience with as well. But it's very difficult to schedule, to get people in place, and then through the COVID life cycle, we've all lived through for the last few years. It's very difficult to bring people to site and get them into a place where they can actually physically do work. But with SaaS, you can scale it really fast. Having said that, because you can scale it really fast, if you don't stay ahead competitively, technologically, if you're not innovating, you can find yourself out of business really fast. So very, very fast to scale, but you can fall behind quickly. So it's a fast-moving landscape. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and maybe I just want to quickly touch on something, or ask a follow-up question to that, right? Would you say there are differences in enterprise SaaS, right, in other sectors versus mining? I think that's the hung up that a lot of people sort of grapple with is that, that hey, I've been trying to sell my SaaS product to a Newmont or Barrick, for instance, right, and I'm not getting a lot of traction.
Yeah, it's it's going to be different than, say, direct to consumer sales, right? Because you have multiple people, multiple stakeholders you have to engage. So the definition of that is complex sales. So complex sale is anyone where you have multiple shareholders that all have to sign off on it. So in the case of selling something into a mine, let's just say hypothetically you want to sell something to a mining engineer. Well, you don't just have to get that mining engineer is going to use it approval. You're going to have to get probably a tech services manager or a mine manager, their approval. You may have to get general manager's approval, but also you're going to have to get other people who touch that thing. So if it's planning, you're going to have to get geology to understand how whatever you're going to change in planning is going to affect them. So you have multiple stakeholders in any software technology product that you bring to a mine that you have to bring on board, which makes it more complex. It extends the life cycle, or the sales cycle rather, makes it a lot more difficult to get in. So for that reason, you have to choose your customer very, very importantly, your potential customer. You got to be very careful who you go to.
Fred, I know you unmuted for a second. Did you have anything to add there?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, especially with some of the bigger multinational mining companies, you're definitely going to be having the IT folks involved. And even the mid-majors are probably going to be very serious about data security and have questions about your product.
Yeah, I think I can add to that with a similar experience as Fred and Will, pointed out that it's about who you choose as a customer, but also I think once you get involved in this SaaSification world that we are living, we're really kind of transitioning this complex applications, which will always sold at this bulky kind of legacy-oriented environment, big applications. Now you're trying to SaaSify these applications. So there is always this conundrum of like, how the user will get the support, and then how that support will scale, for them through the SaaS applications. So that's another point to look at, like when we are kind of rolling out the enterprise SaaS model.
All you have quickly touched on, right? This customer type. There are the multinationals, and then you also have the juniors, right? The mid tiers, which all have different personnel and processes. Ravi, from your experience, just touching on a different segment, right? Because your product is mainly sold to the aggregate and cement industry, which is a different segment than metal miners, right? What are some of the differences or unique, I guess, characteristics of selling into that market that people should be aware of?
Yeah, and when we look into the aggregates and cement and the mines, people think that it's the same industry in general, like you're applying the similar processes, but it's actually not. It operates very differently. You have a totally different cost structure from the operational side, and how they make a decision, the OpEx and the CapEx works very differently. So the solutions may apply into the large mines that you're building, and it can also apply in the aggregates and cement mines as well. But the way to approach that and the way to build the pricing model and the business model and the SaaS, support around that looks very differently. So what we have seen from our experience, the cost does matter in the aggregates and cement side, along with the value that you're providing. And how to scale that to multiple sites, having that structure. So you're starting with maybe in the large mines, you can start with one mine, and one mine can make a lot of decisions, and then it can cascade to the other corporate regions. But in the aggregates and cement, a lot of the decisions can start directly from the corporate, where the regional areas, area managers are owning the entire P&L, and it can be cascaded to multiple sites very quickly. So how you can scale your solutions and SaaS to multiple sites, you can start in about 1 month in one site, but you could be looking at 50 sites in about by the end of the year. So you also need to be ready in terms of those deployments, along with how you can build a business model and cost around that to scale that.
Got it. What would you say in that segment is a typical sales cycle from a time frame perspective?
The initial start is similar to large mining companies, so having worked with both similar customer categories, large mines, and then also the aggregate and cement, the evaluation process looks very differently. In the large mines, what we have seen is you have multiple stakeholders, as Will mentioned, that you have a team, geology team, if you're looking at the operation side, drilling and blasting, and then you have downstream stakeholders also involved. While in the aggregates and cement, you have essentially, because the mines, you have only few stakeholders in this aggregate and cement, smaller mines, you have only few people that you're dealing with. So the decision and the evaluation process is like revolves around only few set of people. So that process goes eventually fast, but in order to run a trial, because there are very few set of resources, that is a very time-taking process, because you need to pull them from their daily duties in order to evaluate what you're trying to propose and generate this new case studies or value that you're trying to show. On the other hand, around on the mining community, you have resources willing to test your product and give a lot of kind of feedback, but the decision making of having to test the product and going to the actual sale, converting into a sale, it's a very long process there. So it's and in general, what we've seen in aggregate and cement, the typical timeline of the, it's about like 4 to 5 months, what we have seen.
Interesting.
While in
What
the
would-
mining, it's always like, we can go up to like 7 to 8 months as well.
Yeah, I mean, Fred, from Maptek's perspective, what do you typically see?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with those timelines. I mean, it can vary pretty widely depending on, what the scale of what you're trying to achieve is. And Ravi brings up a great point about the resources, even in the metals, non-metal sector, that's a problem. And it's, I think, largely, linked to just the talent in, the industry. We have a big problem with actually bringing, just bodies into these positions. So yeah, that can be a major risk to any opportunity. Is, do you have a person that's really accountable, to trialing your product? So I think it's something definitely to be aware of, and be cognizant of up front when you're, approaching a customer, because otherwise, the cycle can languish, sometimes over 12 months. And that becomes quite difficult.
Right. Right. Yeah. So if you're a founder listening to this, right, I think having a realistic expectation of how long it could take, right, to land at least even one right customer, and knowing that it's going to take some time and being prepared and raising enough money to be able to actually buy you that runway, I think is an important lesson here. I think. Will, I want to ask you a little bit about, I guess maybe dig a little bit deeper into this customer type. It's not just I guess the metals versus non-metals, right? I guess the segments, right, or the juniors versus the multinational miners like Newmont and Barrick. What about those types of customers, right, who are early adopters and laggards and so on, right? Maybe
Sure.
when from your own experience when you were selling 3D or Pro, what are some of the characteristics you've seen and some of the people you've had better luck with, and how
sure.
should a founder approach that?
So there's a philosophy that I found to be very true in every organization that I've worked in, and this includes introduction of multiple new technologies and going through 2 startups to acquisitions. And that philosophy, it's called crossing the chasm. I didn't invent it. Can't remember the guy's name. I have a book back here, but you can get it for like $5 at a bookstore or on Amazon or something. I highly, highly recommend it. But the crossing the chasm philosophy basically states that that every product has a life cycle that looks like a normal distribution, and each segment would be like number of customers over time. So the product starts with very little customers, gets lots and lots more, and then at some point the product starts to die and it ends its useful life. And each of those segments of that total customer profile, they're different. They think differently. You market to them differently. Each of them has different requirements for what they need. So irrespective of whether it is a very, very large mining house or a tiny junior mining company, what you're looking for when you talk to people are certain attributes, and that will allow you to put them into those categories. And what I mean is, if they're like super techie and they just want to try new stuff and they see that there's opportunity for improvement, they might be innovators, right? They're not going to get mad if it doesn't work. They're going to help you figure out what this product should be. And then that innovative group will talk to people who are early adopters. So these aren't people that want to build the thing, but they're people that are willing to take a chance on something that's not quite ready for the mainstream, and you haven't thought out every little thing that it needs to do. Maybe it's still got some bugs. So that customer segment then is how you get across what we call a chasm, or what the proverbial chasm is called, into the pragmatic marketplace. The pragmatic marketplace expects things to work properly. They expect you to have a very clear value proposition. They expect you to be able to support it globally, as Ravi was saying earlier. These are all things that have to be in place prior to taking a technology from an early adopter to the mainstream. right? And that chasm is where technology goes to die. You can have the absolute best product in the world, right? It can be well funded. It can have, all these bells and whistles. And if you don't have all those boxes checked and you pitch it to people who are mainstream, who are pragmatic, they will kill your product. They'll kill your reputation. They'll kill your company. So I've seen this play out a couple times. So it's really, really important that you talk to the right customer segments in the right way and you have the right expectations. For example, someone who is at a big mining house maybe and who has dozens and dozens of mines, that is not somebody that you want to take an idea to and go, let's build this together. Most of the time, that's not going to work out well. Also, you might be very early on and having some wins with some innovators, some early adopters, and some big customer might say, "Come on board, I've got 30 mines or whatever. Like, let's get it into these operations. And if you're not ready, you'll kill it." So the biggest danger, I think, in introducing technology into this marketplace is the desire for sales and the need for cash flow sometimes makes us do things we shouldn't do, and then we regret it later. So that would be my biggest piece of advice for anybody that's at this, the early stages.
Those are great points. Ravi, do you want to add anything to that, since you're right in the thick of it?
Yeah, I think we'll give an a spot on explanation of what are the different stages, right, that you go through. But just sharing my experience here, when I look at the customer profile very early, when you're starting out, when you're building the product, and when you're focusing on the sales activity, right, it is very important to gather facts, not opinions from the customer. It's about not would you buy it, but do you buy it? It's about this. There is a difference, right? And as a founder, we always tend to go into the fantasy land of okay, customers given me a lot of feedback, let's just go and work on those, and we start to kind of blur the line between would you and do you, and so that's one thing that it's very important to recognize. So really facts related to the real pain and the cost, but not the implied gains that they are kind of going to receive. So if we can get those into the conversations from the customer that we're talking to, then it's very easy to recognize they are the right customer profile for us in the early on to work with them, and whom to focus on, because early on we are only few people company, let's say only 2 or 3 people, right, building the product and trying to also get the sales. You have a very you need the focus needs to be there, and you're only working with only few set of customers, only 2 or 3 customers. So choosing them, as Will rightly said, it's very, very important. So facts, not the opinions. And if you're chasing to multiple business use cases, that's also a trap that you can get into. So only focus on one use case or business problem, instead of customers describing multiple problems sometimes they get into, and that could be eventually hugely dilutive to your product. You can always build more things later, but early on it's very important to just really focus on one use case and deliver the value. Another important thing that I would like to add is once you've identified this customer profile, make sure to validate only one thing, which is some sort of either a letter of intent or a purchase order, because without that, nothing goes, nothing gets kind of, validated, from that, whether you're in the right path. That was some of the mistakes that I did early on. We kept not really identifying the customer profile properly, but we quickly, realized that, what are the areas that to focus on. And once you start validating with these LOIs or, POs, the customer also becomes very focused on giving what they want as well.
Fred, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just, in customer success, kind of our mantra is to deliver the promise. So, even if you enter into an opportunity with the best intentions that's too big or too much, like ultimately you're going to fail your customer. Because you're not going to have the resources either to support them or on the product side to do, whatever it was that you guys intended to do together. So, aside from just thinking about it from the perspective of the company, the customer is also going to be failed. And as Will mentioned, that's going to be detrimental to your reputation. In an industry like the mining industry, it's very small. So the chance of you running into that person again, if you're still in the business, is very high. So it's just not a good look.
Fred, I want to ask, since Maptek is a multinational company, right, covering basically all the regions, have a number of different products and cover or service, right, many different types of customers. What would you say, right? Is mining really, right, thirsty for innovation? As an innovation provider, right? Mining is very not a monolith, right? It's very diverse industry. I don't want to generalize it, but at the same time, right, when people are thinking about starting a company or right trying to get that first contract or PO, right, what kind of an expectation should they have with regards to innovation?
Yeah, I mean, it's as you mentioned, it's not a monolith. It's very diverse, and Will alluded to, kind of these different segments of customers that are out there, and definitely they exist in our industry. So, I guess you got to put the legwork in to have conversations to understand the appetite of the customer, what their persona really is, and whether or not they actually are looking to are looking for an innovative solution, or are willing to, do something that and take on maybe a little bit more risk than that customer who, maybe has innovative on their, website, but is really looking for something that is really, fairly well established. So I don't think there's I don't think there's a rule of thumb per se to understanding, who's an innovator and who isn't, other than that, a lot of sales and business development, and even, just expansion sales and renewal sales as well, is about client relationships and building relationships. And, for me in my role, that's primarily what it's about, is helping my customers, understanding, what their needs are, really listening to what they're saying, and deciding for myself whether they're, people who are, thirsty for that bleeding edge technology, or maybe they're more reserved.
Got it.
Tim, can I just say one thing? Fred said a key word there that I think is really important. Friends. Like, if you're developing tech, you want to be friends with the innovative and early adopter types, and those are the people you want to work with. You said it really well. Relationships are important, but there are people you can be very good friends with that are not innovative and they're not early adopters. So it can definitely go both ways. And I put one of the questions Sasha asked, I put some text in there to help distinguish between those, but pick up, I have to advocate for the book. Pick up the book. It's like $5, Crossing the Chasm. And they really go through how to identify those, what segment someone is in. And that makes a big difference.
So I think all of you mentioned something really interesting, right? Like identifying, who they are, right? And I think Ravi mentioned, right, oftentimes when you're, chasing the customers, sort of, and then they're taking their feedback and incorporating a lot of the features they want into the product and reiterating. But at what point, right, do you say, hey, look, we've been chasing this customer for way too long. Like, what's our kill criteria? Like, how do you kill, this effort that you've been chasing? Because, I think, a lot of, I think many of you, right, at least on this panel, and some of you in the participants list, right, know that mining is a very cyclical industry as well, right? So it's not just the type of customer you have and all of these other things, but then you also have this like macro effect that's also taking place. So how do you think about, right, what's the time, or what sort of triggers your decision making process and saying, hey, look, maybe not right now, let's put this customer on hold for however many months, right? And then maybe come back to it. Who wants to take this one just on the kill criteria and how you identify and define and put some plans around it? Fred, go for it.
I'll open up because I don't have a lot to say, and then maybe these guys can add on. But I think it's important to ask the questions and be upfront. Kind of in the early engagements, like ask the questions about timeline and lay out your own expectations of timeline and get an agreement on that. Because most of the opportunities that I've been involved in where we didn't do that because maybe we were overly ambitious, or we really wanted to be involved in it, so we didn't want to force the issue, those are the ones that tend to go on too long. So I think it's really important to be upfront, and even if it's a difficult conversation, just to say like, okay, these are our expectations, what are your guys' expectations, and get some agreement on timeline.
Ravi said earlier, I'll paraphrase, ask the money question, which I think is important. Like, it doesn't matter how awesome you think this might be or how good it might be. Do you have the money to pursue this? If not, when? Or is this something, if they start going, oh yeah, we just have a lot going on, like immediately the trigger should be in your mind, like, great, maybe I'll keep in touch with them, but I'm not gonna spend my time on it. Alternatively, there are some companies that will lead you on, like, look at this shiny thing, and string you along. And that's why you really have to, you should not be targeting people who are not in the customer segment that the product is in. So I don't care how big the fish is. I mean, I've seen this happen. There's a guy that works for me, or works on my team anyway, who in university and for his master's thesis, he created a really interesting and innovative polygon optimizer, and it works really well. But the first customer he tried to go after has 30+ mines, and they strung him along for 2 years, never got any revenue, and ultimately he had to fold it because he wasted really his opportunity to launch a new product on somebody who is not in the right customer segment. And history is littered with these. So I do think it's very important to identify that, and also to identify what mode the customer is in, whether are they scared because something's going wrong? Are they in trouble? Are they in growth mode? So are they thinking, hey, you know what, things are good, but they could be a lot better. Let's innovate, right? Or are they sort of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? And you've got to ask questions that get you those answers. So you know where the individual is, and then you can see where the organization is with respect to that technology life cycle. And if those things aren't matching with where you are, you should be friends, shake hands, and keep in touch. But they're not ready. Do not waste another second on that fish.
That's great.
Ravi may have a
a
different take on it. He's in a little bit of a different customer segment than I am.
Yeah. So I think
maybe Ravi, sorry to interject. Maybe Ravi, if you could also touch on, because I know when prior in our prior conversations, I think you've talked about budgets, right? How your customers have a very different view on budgets, right? Capital versus operating. If you can also touch on that, I think that could be really interesting to the audience as well. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to touch on kind of the last topic there about how to say off ramp them, right? That's usually and it's a difficult thing to do, and usually I think the best way to go about that is how to ask for a feedback, like so that they say they give kind of more honest assessment of like where this relationship is moving toward, of like the different cultural aspect. Because if you're talking to a LATAM, if you're talking to APAC, Australia, Asia, North America, the same intention, the feedback you will receive looks very differently. In LATAM, everything looks great. They want to work with you, but it always sounds so positive, and you may be like, a little bit kind of delusional there, like, everything is going well, but, you may not know that, this is actually not moving anywhere. Same thing like in the APAC as well. US a lot more direct. Canadian kind of, no is always sometimes looks like yes, but it's not that much, you can't read that. So I would also keep that cultural aspect in mind when you're reading and asking for the feedback. The another aspect is, usually it takes a lot of time to learn and develop these signals. It took obviously a lot for me. Now I have like really good understanding of like when somebody is giving a feedback and what to ask, to usually, sometimes you ask a direct question. Essentially, if they're directing a lot more feedback that your feature that you have, if what they ask and you did and it's not, everything is done and still they're not moving to the next step. That means, we usually kind of have said before, it sounds like the time is not right. I think we are not a good fit right now. We will be coming back to you later, or essentially kind of, self-qualifying to say no to them so that they have an easy chance of saying no at the moment. And usually it can go in both ways. They will have an opportunity to say no, or they will just come back and say I think we are ready to kind of move forward from here. So that's where we've learned like how to ask for feedback so that we get an honest assessment from there. Moving to the budget topic here, it's the tendency of a lot of the customers right now that what we have seen is when we're talking about the SaaS applications, what we have seen a lot of the budgets is increasingly moving towards the OpEx now. And even in certain cases, a lot of our customers, they are able to move that budget around so fast, because CapEx, they need to go to procurement, build a contract around it for like, let's say, and start negotiating with that. When we start talking about, let's say we want to do it in only 1 or 2 sites, the approval gets like really fast in one, and that kind of happens just from a mine manager, who has individual budget. He just kind of shuffles around. He may be allocating some to buy some equipment. Now he can also kind of allocate to run those equipment. He has an OpEx budget there. Now he can allocate that for the software as a service as well. So we've seen that happening a lot over the last 3 years now, the customers that we work with. While on the large mining space, that still there is a bit of a CapEx, procedure that it still goes through. Still the IT is involved, and whenever IT is involved, they look at very differently there. While on the other segments, the aggregates and cements, it's a lot more different. Where what we've seen a trend of just considering as an OpEx and continue to move that fast.
Those are great points. I think what you were saying is right. Historically, mining, right, had a model where when you buy software, especially, I mean, I remember my engineering days when I was a mining engineer. There's a software called MineSight. I think it costed, Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like $65,000 a year, right? You pay one big annual license fee, and then you on top of that, you pay a maintenance fee, right, which are divided into 2 different buckets. And I think that model is changing, right? It's changing towards becoming or more adopting more of the SaaS model. Does that have anything, any impact on pricing, right? So maybe, right, if you're a founder, right, people often dangle these huge contracts, right, because it's a a mining company with 30 sites, and you can maybe charge $65,000 a year per license, and I don't know how many licenses, right? All of a sudden that becomes a multi-million-dollar opportunity, and that's on one hand it's really attractive, but it can take forever, and you got to go through all these steps. But on the other hand, right, do you think about pricing differently, right, to then put it into a different budget bucket to get the approvals faster, right? Hopefully you'll show or demonstrate traction, right, and verify your value proposition very quickly, because it's not about getting that one big contract, especially if you're just starting, right? You just want someone to use it and validate that whatever you're providing actually is of value, and then you can hopefully scale from there. Fred, do you want to talk about some of the differences? I know you've been in the industry for a long time, from the days when we actually had like dongle licenses and things like that. So if you can share some of the historical background there, not to
Yeah, I
not to
actually
date you, but
found a dongle in my desk the other day. I wasn't sure what to do with it, so it's still just hanging around. But yeah, I mean, the alignment of how you end up pricing it is obviously, becomes critical. I don't have any, specific points on how to do that. That's obviously, that's a science unto itself. But, I guess, some of the major differences between kind of a perpetual capital and maintenance model versus a subscription model, is that the customer, really, I think, largely gains in the subscription model, because in the capital model, it's a big investment for them and they're kind of saddled with it, after that. In the subscription model, the vendor is held a lot more accountable, because there's a lot less pain for the subscriber to move to your competitor. If they subscribe for a year and they don't like you at the end of the year, it's not, they haven't just sunk a bunch of money into your product. So it's definitely, it's changed the industry. Vendors, like Maptek, we have to make sure that we're helping our customers. We're actually providing them what we said, the value that we said we could provide them. So that's a big task for all the people listening here who want to get their product out there. Is you got to make sure that you actually can do what you say you can do. Otherwise, you're not going to be around for very long. And I think that's, probably one of the major differences between, subscription and perpetual.
I hate perpetual. I think it's a terrible business model. I don't mind saying it too. I think perpetual is problematic because it gives you little incentive to innovate, and you're constantly trying to resell your maintenance. So imagine the case where you sell software to someone and then you find that there's something inside it the next year that it wasn't being done quite right, or you need to change it to give people the proper outcomes. Well, you have to then convince them to buy that upgrade, or you risk them continuing to use something that's maybe not quite as innovative, not giving them the value that they thought, and bad mouthing your product and leading you to detrimental outcomes. I think it's a terrible business model. I don't know why I don't know who invented it or why, but I've pushed very hard to go away from that. And I would much rather sell a SaaS model and constantly give updates, fix bugs, create new features, and continue to innovate than I would to just go, right, we had a big sale, we're done, and let's revisit them next year and see if we can convince them to buy our new features. It's problematic. But you said it, Fred, like it's fast moving. So if you don't keep up, they're just not going to renew and you won't know what's coming. So
yeah, so hopefully with this change, I know other industries have already moved and transitioned into the SaaS model. It sounds like mining is going through that, or maybe have been going through this for the past few years. So that's good thing to hear. And then since we're talking a little bit about business models here, there are many different ways to sell a service, to the mining industry. I know, Will, you used to travel, to mine sites all the time, week in, week out, right? And then
I had like 85% travel for almost 10 years.
Yeah, I mean that's brutal, right? So I think, if you are thinking about going that route, direct sales approach, directly selling to the mines, who you're meeting with the technical service manager, the mine managers who will control these operating budgets and can give you that relatively quick approval. You can certainly do that, which is really, really helpful, but it does require that personality or that type of a person who can be on the road all the time. What are other models, right? Ravi, I mean, you've been quite successful leveraging channel partners, right? Resellers and distributors and blasting service providers and so on. Ravi, you can start. Well, I want to hear your stories as well. Fred, then, right? Can you guys talk about the different ways a company can sell their service to the mining industry?
Yeah. One of the things that we did in the beginning, because we're dealing with the customers. First of all, your product needs to work absolutely what you have promised. Without a good product, the customers kind of won't even refer to anyone, right? So the referral was like became the important part early on for us. When we are going and implementing the solutions, we started asking the same customers, who would you think would benefit from solutions like Strayos? And like Will's example, kind of, you need to pick innovators. Innovators are really good in actually talking about what solutions that they are experimenting with. So they would definitely talk to 5 of their friends. And that's how we got kind of some of our early customers. And as we started to go into the next phase of getting more customers, we started to add a customer advisory group in our company, which means a bunch of customers who are talking and building kind of this, not only what our next set of the roadmap should look like, but also we have this kind of consistent engagement from that process. So we're trying to kind of lead with the product-led growth, where we help our customers kind of identify the next set of customers through that channel. Now, what we have done is we have tried to scale that model and go towards the channel partners, which are either partners which are selling a similar type of solutions, and they can bundle. So distributors or a channel partners or OEMs as well. If you can stack your solutions with an OEM where they have machines which are generating the data and your solutions can go with it, that's another channel is there. But with channels, what we have seen is the way to work successfully is it takes a lot of effort. It's not an easy thing to accomplish, because it's one thing to just go and execute an agreement and say, hey, this is your market, this is your territory, and they start selling. It never happens like that. And I've gone into that mode where we have partners, we're there for a year, a couple of years, produce nothing. We revised that model over the last 1.5 or 2 years to what is really needed. So we have to really dedicate a resource from your end to not only train, but also build an entire sales plan for them, that this is where we think Strayos would sell well, and we're going to help you. And this is, since once they start seeing the help, they are more incentivized to start selling. The other approach that we took is every distributors we sign, we have a commitment that we ask that you hire an actual salesperson and investment who will dedicatedly put an effort into Strayos. And we are willing to do that from our side, the similar type of investment, so that there is a more commitment there. Then usually kind of the model works. Otherwise, it's just they can keep adding more products into their portfolio, but usually it will never kind of mature that relationship. There has to be real commitment from both the sides to go. Yeah.
That's really helpful. Will, do you want to talk about the direct sales, and then also I know you did a little bit of consulting as well, right? You've gotten them.
Yeah. Do you have those 2 slides that I sent you via email? Do you want to put it up?
Let's see. I should.
Yeah. Just Yeah, so what you're
Thank
looking
you.
at right here is I made this to really to help people inside of our organization as well as external. So I teach sometimes at School of Mines, and that's where this came from, was helping people understand how did we actually, what did that journey look like. So I have some major milestones on here, along with things like how did the product progress. But more interestingly than this slide is the next one, Tim. If you could put that next one up, which was number 2. The image is called image number 2. That one. Okay. So initially we had an idea, but we didn't have a product. So we had some early code. I used Surpack. We built an online polygon optimizer, and then we built some very, very basic code in Visual Basic to just help us translate points. What we were building here was a blast movement model and polygon optimizer for grade control optimization. And it's something nobody had combined together. There are some polygon optimizers that people had built, and people had been trying to build blast movement models for a long time, but no one had combined them. So it required a fundamental shift in how people thought to do this. So we started off with barely even like a proof of concept, but just code in 3 different places, and it would take like 8 hours to be able to run a single iteration of this and get like basically a yes/no answer on some blocks. That's really all it did. So I took that product and I went to my friends, the early adopter people weren't even on the stage yet, innovators, and said, how about this? Pay me to do a consulting project. I'll come to the mine for a couple weeks, and I will use this stuff that we're building to answer a question for you or to give you some data. So you're not buying anything from me. It's very simply a consulting project. Will you sign on to that? And my friends trusted me enough to go, yeah, we'll do that. So what you can see there in that green line is consulting. And that green line shows the consulting revenue. So from the end of 2017 through the end of 2018, that was all of our revenue. And we used that revenue to build the product. So I would go from mine to mine to mine, running projects, learning about issues that people had that this thing might be able to solve, and building those features into a working product that we launched in the beginning of 2019. And in 2019, people were still a little bit unsure, like, I don't know, I know you've got this thing, but ours is different. So I was still doing consulting projects, but I was doing less and less consulting projects and starting to sell more licenses to software. So 0 software revenue in 2018, and then the software revenue starts to climb in 2019 while the consulting revenue starts to drop. Then we go to 0 consulting revenue and all product revenue once the market was willing to accept the solution that we built. So once we got through the innovator and early adopter stages, we stopped doing consulting projects for the most part. Does that make sense, Tim? Did I?
Oh, absolutely. This is really good,
right?
because a lot of people, right, especially VCs, when they talk to companies who have started doing consulting, we ask the question, right, is this scalable, right? Are you going to continuously, right, providing this consulting service? And some people say yes, and some people deliberately will say exactly what you said, right? We're using this to bridge ourselves to a point where we can then generate, right, revenue from the key product. And I think that's the point that I'm trying to make to the audience here, right? Is that you can definitely start using the consulting model in the first year or so, right? As long as you have this vision that you're going to, right, generate enough revenue to basically bridge yourselves to a position where you can then start selling the software as a service. So I think that's a really good one, a real example. I'm really glad that you've actually shared these slides with us to demonstrate to people that it is a real strategy that can actually work. So really appreciate you, Will, for showing that. That's a great one. Okay, I know we've been talking for a long time. We only have a few minutes left. Let's go to the Q&A side. Stage of the webinar. Let's see, we have one here, Lipsa. asks, how do you identify whom you should speak to when you're making a list of your potential off-takers or maybe customers? Also, how do you know a priority where in the budget they might allocate your product? Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I can go and add some of my observations here that I have experienced. So where in order to identify whom to speak with, so first you have to do obviously the exercise, the product that you're building, like, what use cases and the focus areas. You will see kind of ideal profile, like, if you're selling to geologists, usually mines, who have a geologist, there, or, geotech guys are there. If it's more on the operation side, so talking to mine managers or plant managers are there. So ideally, you will have some sort of this personas done. And if you're able to target like, 3 or 4 categories, that should be a good one to start with. Ideally, I would like my approach has always been to talk to first engineering team, and then also once I'm done, I always also talk to their managers, or kind of the surrounding what's called the peripheral group of people who can also give a different type of feedback. Not just the engineers, because engineers are very focused on what they always try to come up with the solutions first instead of actually explaining the problem. So just kind of, but they are a very good group of people to talk to because they give you a lot of actual information. So having to talk with the engineering and then also kind of peripheral group of people. And then I think the second question was more about how to the cost, what type of kind of, how to sell them. Is that was
The second one was, how do you know a priority where in their budget they might allocate your product?
So if it's like way too early, I usually do not try to ask them, do you have a budget? If your product is way too early, because they don't. They have not even thought about like what your product can do. So it's not a really a good question at that point of time frame to ask, do you have a budget? I think at that point of time, just really try to hone in that what problem that you're solving, that they're going to use this product. And then after that, you usually try to get some type of POC budget, from them, which means the POC budget usually comes from, they have a certain portion of money that they usually keep to experiment. In most of the mines that they have this, experimental money that they keep with. So that usually kind of can come in once you start like showing some positive points or proof points about your solutions.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Okay, we're at the top of the hour here. Before we end, though, I do want to just do a quick lightning round. And it can be the same lessons you've already shared, or maybe a new one that maybe you wanted to talk about, but we haven't gotten to. But in a very short, quick lesson, 20 seconds, each one of you, what is one lesson that you would, give yourself if you were starting a company, say, 5 years ago? Ravi, do you want to say, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there anything that you could say that, hey, I wish I would have done this, that other founders should hopefully not repeat?
I think there are many things, but one thing that I would say, it's definitely very hard. It's not easy, easiest thing. I think, I knew that, but it's the lightning round, but I would say like, I think get a lot better advisors and support around you if you're especially not from the mining.
Great one. Will?
I would not have wasted time on a very big fish. I would have seen the signs that they were never going to be a customer, but I jumped at a shiny thing that I shouldn't have, and it was very time consuming and frustrating to deal with, and I won't make that mistake again.
That was a good one. Fred, I know you work for Maptek, which is a very different, very big company. What do you see from a large mature company's perspective, when you're selling multiple products to the likes of Newmont?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's all about the customer. If you can develop your customers into advocates for your brand or your products, then it's doing the lead generation and the expansion parts that comes easy because they'll call you up. So
Okay, great. I know we have one last question. It says free POC versus no premium model. What is the best in case of enterprise SaaS? We'll make that the last one, and then we'll end the webinar. Does anybody want to answer that one? Go ahead.
We still do free proof of concepts. It depends on the amount of effort, but you want to make sure that they have skin in the game. And if they don't have skin in the game, or they're not willing to actually participate, I wouldn't do it. But I think it's maybe we're probably 19 out of 20 free proof of concepts have turned into sales for us.
Wow.
I mean,
okay.
Free POCs are okay, but I don't believe in the freemium model. No, nothing is free.
we don't have a freemium model currently. I mean, we do proof of concepts. Some are free, some are not. It obviously depends on the complexity, but I mean, the freemium model is all about product led growth. So it's really just a sales tactic in and of itself.
Great answers. I really appreciate all three of your time today to talk about this. I know we've barely scratched the surface. There are so many different things that we haven't talked about. But if anybody actually wants to follow up and have more discussions with any one of us, please do reach out, and then we can make those connections for you. But otherwise, I hope everybody enjoyed this webinar on sales and mining, and then wish all of you best of luck, and stay tuned for our next webinar. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Fred. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Sam.